In this video, we're going to watch a debate between Russell Brand and Jordan Peterson. This is a debate where two individuals have quite different opinions about very important matters. And whilst it does get a bit heated at times, it's a great example of how two people who think differently can have discussions about very controversial topics. So with that, let's get into the clips.
What I would like to draw your attention to, still sort of within the broad rubric of looking at Musk's acquisition of Twitter and how that may play out and how it may affect you personally. I was myself struck with, I think the tweet that you were banned for was sort of like commenting on Elliot Page. How do we prioritize compassion, kindness, love? And can't this basic palette of principles prevent us from getting into conflict around these ideas?
Well, it isn't obvious to me that love can be reduced to compassion at all, because for a variety of reasons. First of all, I think love is a multidimensional virtue, and there's many other virtues than compassion. Think about it this way, Russell. Imagine that the purest expression of compassion is the love of a mother for a true infant. We could really think about that as true compassion, 100% compassion. And the reason for that is that if you have an infant from birth to, say, 6 months old, nothing the infant does is ever to be questioned. The proper response to the infant is whatever the cause of their distress, you immediately prioritize its reduction. But then as the child starts to develop, and as soon as it becomes capable of its own voluntary movement, as soon as it becomes ambulatory, its nervous system starts to change, of course. But then there are other elements that have to be introduced into the relationship to make it a relationship of proper love. And some of that's judgment, which is often considered antithetical to compassion. And some of it's encouragement, and encouragement has a fair bit of judgment in it, because when you're encouraging someone, you're not exactly being compassionate for who they are. You're doing what you can to facilitate who they could be. And what you're doing constantly when you're encouraging someone is prioritizing who they could be over who they are. And that's an element of judgment. And that judgment, you might say, if you're not thinking about it precisely from the religious perspective, is your own ability to decide which parts of you should go. Then the question is, are you compassionate for who you are? Or are you compassionate for who you could be? And the second is just as important, or maybe more important.
So Russell touched on the idea of kindness and compassion there. And whilst I do genuinely appreciate the notion of meeting your fellow human being with kindness and compassion, it's something that I very rarely, if ever, evoke on this channel. And I do see the necessity for people like Russell Brand and Lex Friedman to focus on love and compassion, and it's a necessary part of the discourse. However, I don't see it as some sort of be-all and end-all solution, because as human beings, unfortunately, we are naturally inclined towards utter depravity and towards duplicitousness. And this is something that is deeply ingrained within us, and it's not something that we can simply alleviate by sitting around a bonfire together and holding hands and singing the Black Eyed Peas' Where Is the Love in unison. There will always be people, and I'm sure you've met a few of these individuals, who will tell you to your face that they love you, but then as soon as you turn your back, they will plunge the dagger in. And this is why I much prefer the Jungian idea of incorporating the shadow, something that Peterson talks about quite a lot. And here's a quote regarding that. Good does not become better by being exaggerated, but worse. And a small evil becomes a big one by being disregarded and repressed. The shadow is very much a part of human nature, and it is only at night that no shadows exist. I believe that people who think that love and compassion is the only way without a discerning eye are naive, and they will be absolutely no match when the forces of malicious and resentful evil come forth bearing a contrived smile.
And when that's applied to the self, I can see that the requirement for this judgment, the great success you've had in, clean your room, stand up straight, these kind of edicts offered to young men or young people who require discipline, I can see the success of that. But Jordan, I feel that when it becomes an outward strike of like, this person should not have done this thing, this is the impact these actions will have on the culture, this will lead to this kind of denigration, this will lead to decisions that are, in my view, palpably wrong. I feel that this is where we have to redress an imbalance around compassion. I feel that Elliot Page should be able to do whatever Elliot Page wants to do And that my only role is to say, I recognize that I don't understand, and why would I understand? There are less obvious things that you could never understand about me. They're less evident and obvious, and for me, the basic principle of kindness and compassion is going to be my guide when dealing with Elliot Page, and when posting something about Elliot Page. I do have recourse to the idea of, what do I want Elliot Page to feel? Happy. Accepted. That's what I want Elliot Page to feel. And if there are aspects of that I don't understand, then I'm willing to take the hit.
When you think about your behavior on your YouTube channel, you're spending a lot of time in public criticism, and going after large corporations, going after those who are engaged in fascist collusion, and I think rightly so. I think that you're an extremely useful voice in that regard, and you're a critical voice, and you're a critical comedic voice, which is a good kind of critical voice, and not exactly compassionate, right? Because you're also using creativity on the humor side to make your point, and you're doing it in a playful way. And I think that playful criticism is the hallmark of the master critic. And I think the joker and the jester in that regard are master critics. But that's not compassion, right? That's a different virtue. And often it's very, very pointed. You do act as a social critic in many, many ways, and you do leaven it with comedy, and I think that's extraordinarily appropriate. It's part of what's given you such a broad voice, and that criticism is absolutely necessary. Now, let's speak about Elliot Page more specifically. So the first thing I'd like to bring up is the fact that in the UK, the Tavistock Clinic was recently closed, and that was the biggest clinic doing gender transformation surgery that operated in the British world. 1,000 of the 19,000 kids have now launched a lawsuit for medical malpractice. And when Elliot Page went online and showed off his or her new chest, she or he got 1.7 million Instagram likes. So then the question is, okay, compassion. Well, I think Elliot Page stepped over the line from victim to perpetrator, because when girls hit puberty, their negative emotion spikes and they develop bodily image problems. Because neurotic, and that would be negative emotional experience for women, is extremely tightly tied to body image. And so if you're a girl who is undergoing the hormonal changes that are going to elevate your negative emotion, which is what happens at puberty, you're going to be focused on body image. And if you're an unpopular girl and you're awkward socially, the probability that you're going to think something's wrong with your body is almost 100% if you're female.
So let's discuss the Elliot Page, Jordan Peterson situation. Many of you will remember that Jordan Peterson got banned from Twitter for the following tweet. Remember when pride was a sin? And Ellen Page just had her breasts removed by a criminal physician. So Peterson was banned for that, for committing one of the 7 deadly sins of woke progressivism, and that is dead naming, which is the godforsaken act of referring to somebody as the sex that they had lived with and identified with their whole life up until 5 minutes ago. So, should Peterson have been banned from Twitter? Absolutely not. Was this physician a criminal physician? Technically not. If you're somebody who thinks that getting an irreversible medical treatment that will be life-altering should require some sort of measurable symptoms instead of just saying you feel a certain way, and if you're somebody who finds it rather alarming how much money Big Pharma are making from this new problem that's getting bigger and bigger every single year, then sure. But unfortunately, that doesn't really change much right now. You can protest about who is morally correct until you go purple in the face and eventually pass out. The fact of the matter is that Elliot Page, Ellen Page, is a 36-year-old individual. And from the libertarian perspective, a 36-year-old adult individual should be able to do whatever they want with their body as long as they're not directly harming anybody else. Now, obviously, it goes without saying that that's very different for children. But as I see it, we are way past the point of having an intellectual debate with the radical left. And frankly, they don't care for intellectual debates. So the best way to tackle these monumental cultural issues is with ruthless intellectual fervor, ridicule, and most importantly, better ideas and more aspirational role models. It's a matter of winning back the institutions that the far left has done such a remarkable job of capturing and bringing them back to reality.
So I can see what makes you angry about it. It's your analysis and it's your opinion that it's a powerful influencer and it's going to lead people to make decisions that are going to be detrimental to their lives. But the evident and palpable anger, I feel, diminishes your position because now anger is in the conversation. I think you offer a great deal that is valuable and necessary, but I feel beyond the value and necessity of honesty, authenticity, and information that is underwritten by data and experience, I feel that it creates more opposition to approach a matter like this in the manner that you have done. What are we going to anchor ourselves to ultimately, Jordan, navigating this space? Are we going to be participants in creating more and more ossified and oppositional camps, or are we going to create cartilage between us so that we can move between a room that Jordan Peterson is in and a room that Elliot Page is in and say, look, I believe in love, and I know it's complicated. I think you're beautiful and full of love. I really believe in that. And then when I sort of hear people being dismissive of you, it upsets me. It upsets me, and I see how you arm them. I feel that you arm them by sort of, in their language, dead naming Elliot Page. And I feel like why would you do that? It isn't necessary. It isn't necessary. Of course, it's the statistics you've cited about the Tavistock Clinic appear to speak for themselves. Is there a way that we can handle this that would be more akin to how we might imagine Christ would handle it? Otherwise, what's the point of Christianity? What's the point of Christianity if we're not going to embody Christ in our behavior?
Look, everybody who's operating in the online space that we're operating is trying to get the tone right? And you do that in part by paying attention to the audience, and you do that by trying to see how people are responding, and not in a way that's pandering, but in a way that's open and attentive. And it's a very difficult thing to get right. So the question you're asking is, well, when is anger appropriate? When is it not appropriate? When is it only inflammatory? That's a really hard question to answer, to get that balance between judgment and encouraging acceptance right. I suppose part of the problem is we don't know exactly how emotions scale in an online environment, right? And definitely I found that even when I'm delivering very cutting material, as I just wrote an article for the Telegraph on the upcoming privation that Europe is going to be facing and the rest of the world in the winter. And I tried to read it as calmly as I possibly could, even though it's extremely cutting. And the calm delivery seems to alienate fewer people and bring people in more than an angry delivery without any shift in semantic content. The right principle is probably something like minimal necessary force in your personal interactions and minimal necessary emotion in your online behavior. But it's hard to know exactly what that means. And it's not as if I think I've done it perfectly. I mean, you move like this towards that central line that hopefully is moving uphill.
I think what we just witnessed in this debate was a good example of a Venn diagram with a very large middle ground whereby the left and the right can converge, literally and metaphorically. It was kind of like the push and pull between the loving, nurturing mother and the tough love father, between Hobbesian ideas and Rousseauian ideas, but certainly a conversation that was grounded in respect, and a conversation between two high caliber individuals that have more in common than not, and also two very discerning individuals, and two individuals that preach very important and very different messages, but also get a lot from each other. And it's very entertaining to see that dynamic at play. The ones that I worry about are the ones that are more sort of hippy dippy and smile at everyone and trust everyone. I just think with that attitude, life will keep on punching you in the face until eventually it hardens you up a little bit. And the last thing I'll say is this, that Russell Brand mentioned the idea of Jordan Peterson being in a room with his ideological opposite. And the thing is with that Jordan Peterson could go into that room, no worries. He'd hold his own in that room, he would be respectful in that room, and he would readily do that. But the same can't be said about the other side. They literally see him as Hitler. They see him as this evil and terrible person. And you only have to look at some of the caricatures that have been done about Peterson to know that. That'll be it from me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching once again. If you guys want to get at me on social media, hit the link tree in the bio. And if you'd like to join the Rattlesnake TV community on Locals, then that's also in the link tree. And if you want to watch another video, click right here. If you'd like to subscribe to the channel, then click right here. Till next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.